Montana Territory, 1873. The vast, unforgiving landscape stretched before him like a harsh promise, beautiful but deadly in its indifference. Samuel Yates pulled his hat lower against the autumn wind, his 25-year-old frame silhouetted against the fading light. The cattle drive was over, another season of dust and danger behind him, but the emptiness ahead felt just as perilous. "A man's only friend out here is his horse and his gun," he muttered to his stallion Shadow, as they crested the hill overlooking the small settlement of Pine Creek. The words had become his mantra over 3 years riding the range, ever since he'd buried his father and younger brother after the Blackfoot raid on their homestead. Samuel had learned the harsh truth of the frontier early. Attachments were dangerous, people left you either by choice or by death, and a lone rider survived where families perished. His lean, muscular build and handsome features often drew interested glances from young women in the towns he passed through, but Samuel kept his interactions brief. His light brown hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and his clean-shaven face made him appear younger than the weathered cowboys he rode with. But his eyes, deep blue and vigilant, belonged to a man who'd seen too much for his years. The foreman had paid him well for the season's work. Now winter approached, and Samuel needed shelter and provisions. Pine Creek would serve as good a place as any to pass the cold months before moving on again. He never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. "Come on, boy," he urged Shadow forward. "Let's find ourselves a warm stable and some whiskey to chase away the chill." The main street of Pine Creek bustled with more activity than Samuel expected. A newly constructed railroad spur had brought unexpected prosperity to what had once been a forgotten outpost. The weathered buildings showed signs of fresh paint and repair, and the general store's windows displayed goods that would have been unthinkable luxuries just a year prior. Samuel dismounted outside the Frontier Hotel, a 2-story structure that promised clean rooms and hot meals. As he secured Shadow to the hitching post, commotion erupted from across the street. A wagon had overturned, spilling crates and barrels across the muddy thoroughfare. Before he could react, a flash of emerald green caught his eye as a young woman darted into the street, narrowly avoiding being trampled by a startled team of horses. With instincts honed by years on the range, Samuel lunged forward, grabbing her arm and pulling her to safety as the panicked horses thundered past. For a moment they stood frozen, his hand still gripping her sleeve, her wide eyes fixed on his. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the near miss. "I fear I wasn't paying proper attention." Samuel stepped back, suddenly aware of their proximity. "No harm done, miss." The woman before him couldn't have been more than 20, with striking hazel eyes that seemed to shift between green and amber in the late afternoon light. Her chestnut hair was arranged in a practical but becoming style, partially covered by a modest bonnet that matched her emerald dress. Despite the frontier setting, there was something refined in her bearing, education and gentle upbringing evident in her speech and posture. "Katherine Zimmerman," she offered with a slight smile, extending her gloved hand. "Most call me Kate." "Samuel Yates," he replied, tipping his hat rather than taking her hand. "Passing through." Her smile faltered slightly at his coolness, but she recovered quickly. "Well, Mr. Yates, your timely intervention has saved me from certain embarrassment, if not injury. Perhaps I might buy you a cup of coffee as thanks. My father's general store is just down the street." "Thank you kindly, Miss Zimmerman, but I've got business to attend to." The words came automatically, his well-practiced defense against entanglements. "Of course," she nodded, stepping back. "Then welcome to Pine Creek, however brief your stay might be." As she turned to go, Samuel noticed a small leather-bound book had fallen from her pocket during the commotion. "Miss," he called, bending to retrieve it. "You dropped this." Katherine turned back, her face brightening with relief. "My journal. I would have been heartbroken to lose it. Perhaps fate insisted on putting me in your debt twice over." Their fingers brushed as she took the book, and Samuel withdrew his hand quickly, as if burned. "Good day, Miss Zimmerman." He watched her walk away, disappearing into Zimmerman's general store. Only after she was gone did he realize he'd been holding his breath. The Frontier Hotel offered a clean room at a fair price, and Samuel took a hot bath before heading down to the saloon for a meal. The barkeep, a balding man named Olson, proved talkative as he served up a plate of stew. "Staying long, Cowboy?" he asked, wiping down the counter. "Just till spring," Samuel replied. "Looking for work to see me through the winter?" Olson nodded. "Old man Preston at the livery could use help. His arthritis gets worse with the cold. And I heard Zimmerman needs someone to help with freight deliveries now that the railroad's bringing in more goods." Samuel paused mid-bite. "Zimmerman owns the general store. German fella, came out here 15 years back. Widower with a daughter pretty as a picture. Smart too, educated back east somewhere. Folks wonder why she came back to this dusty corner of nowhere when she could have had her pick of city gentlemen." The image of Katherine Zimmerman's hazel eyes flashed in Samuel's mind. He pushed it away, focusing on his stew. "The livery sounds better suited. I know horses." Later that night, as wind rattled the hotel's windows, Samuel found himself unable to sleep. The room was comfortable enough, but his thoughts kept returning to Katherine Zimmerman. There had been something in her gaze, not just beauty but a quiet determination, a sense of purpose that seemed at odds with the typical frontier settlement. "Doesn't matter," he muttered to the darkness. "Come spring, I'll be gone." The next morning, Samuel secured work at Preston's livery. The old man was glad for the help and offered fair wages plus a small room at the back of the stable. By mid-afternoon, Samuel had moved his few possessions and begun familiarizing himself with the business. Preston was particular about his horses but seemed to trust Samuel's experience. "Got a delivery to make," Preston said, gesturing to a loaded wagon. "Zimmerman's store gets a shipment every Tuesday. Can you handle it?" Samuel hesitated but nodded. "Of course." The general store bustled with activity when Samuel arrived. Women examined bolts of fabric while men discussed the merits of various tools. Behind the counter stood a tall, gray-haired man Samuel assumed must be Katherine's father. Frederick Zimmerman had the same determined set to his jaw as his daughter, though his eyes were blue rather than hazel. "Delivery from Preston," Samuel announced, setting down a crate of supplies. Frederick nodded. "In the back room, if you please." "Kate will show you." Before Samuel could object, Katherine appeared from behind a curtained doorway. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by a pleased smile. "Mr. Yates, I see you found employment with Mr. Preston." "Just for the winter," he clarified, hefting the crate. She led him to a storeroom organized with meticulous care. "You can set it there. Father likes everything in its proper place." Samuel placed the crate where indicated, eager to complete the task and leave. The small room felt suddenly constricting with her presence. "Will you be attending the harvest dance on Saturday?" Katherine asked, catching him off guard. "I don't dance, Miss Zimmerman." "Everyone dances at the harvest celebration," she countered. "It's tradition. The whole town attends." Samuel reached for the door. "I'm not much for traditions." "That's a shame," she said, her voice softening. "Traditions are what bind communities together. Even temporary ones." There was something in her tone that made him pause, not judgment but genuine curiosity. "I suppose some folks need that sort of thing." "And you don't," her head tilted slightly, those remarkable eyes studying him with intelligence that made him uncomfortable. "Been on my own since I was 22, found it suits me better that way." Katherine nodded slowly. "Independence has its merits, but winter gets long in Montana territory. Even the wolves run in packs when the snow falls." Her words followed Samuel back to the livery, persistent as an echo. That night, as he cared for the horses, old Preston hobbled over with a mug of coffee. "Saw you made the delivery to Zimmerman's," the old man commented. "Met Kate, I expect." Samuel nodded, brushing down a chestnut mare with long practice strokes. "Remarkable girl," Preston continued. "Could have stayed back east after finishing that fancy school, but came back to help her pa. Got more proposals than you got fingers, I'd wager, but turns 'em all down flat. Says she's waiting for something, though nobody knows what. Her business, not mine, Samuel replied curtly. Preston chuckled. Sure, boy, sure. The days fell into a rhythm. Samuel worked from dawn until dusk, caring for horses, repairing tack, and making deliveries. Each Tuesday took him to Zimmerman's store, where Katherine's presence became both anticipated and dreaded. She always had a smile and a question that seemed designed to pierce the armor he'd so carefully constructed. "What made you choose the cowboy's life, Mr. Yates?" She asked one snowy Tuesday in December. "Wasn't much choice involved," he answered, stacking crates. "My father ran cattle before the Blackfoot took him." He hadn't meant to reveal that much. Something about her quiet attention loosened his tongue against his better judgment. Her face softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry. We lost my mother to fever when I was 12. The holes they leave behind never quite close, do they?" The unexpected understanding in her voice caught him off guard. "No, ma'am, they don't." As winter deepened, Pine Creek settled into a peaceful hibernation broken only by Christmas celebrations and the occasional arrival of the train. Samuel maintained his solitary routine, taking his meals at the hotel and spending evenings alone with a book or caring for the horses. But Katherine Zimmerman had become a persistent presence in his thoughts. One particularly bitter January morning, Samuel arrived at the store to find Katherine alone, her father having traveled to Helena for business. "You shouldn't be here by yourself," he said, concern overriding his usual reserve. "I've managed the store alone before," she replied, organizing a shelf of canned goods. "Besides, Mrs. Thornton from the dressmaker's checks in regularly." Samuel frowned, still not proper. "Or safe." Katherine turned to him, amusement playing at the corners of her mouth. "Are you offering to protect me, Mr. Yates? Because that would require abandoning your carefully maintained solitude." Her teasing tone carried no malice, but it struck uncomfortably close to truth. "Just making an observation." "Well, since you're concerned," she said, descending the ladder, "you could help me inventory these new shipments. Father will be back tomorrow, and I'd like to surprise him with the work completed." Before he could formulate a refusal, she added, "I've made fresh coffee and have some of Mrs. Peterson's apple cake." The offer of cake, a rare luxury in winter, weakened his resolve. "I suppose Preston can spare me for an hour." 1 hour stretched into the afternoon, as Katherine proved to be not only efficient, but engaging company. She spoke of her years at school in Boston, of books she'd read and places she hoped to see. Despite himself, Samuel found himself sharing stories of cattle drives and the characters he'd met on the frontier. "Why did you come back?" he asked finally, the question that had nagged at him since hearing her story. "You could have stayed in Boston, married some businessman or doctor." Katherine's hands stilled on the ledger she was updating. "This is home," she said simply. "I went east to learn, not to find a husband. My father needed me, and I discovered I needed this place, its honesty, its challenges." She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Not everyone who ventures out into the world is looking to escape their past, Mr. Yates." The quiet rebuke silenced him. As he prepared to leave, a heavy snowfall began, quickly intensifying into a blizzard that howled down the street. "You can't go out in that," Katherine said firmly, moving to stoke the store's iron stove. "You'll have to wait it out." Trapped together as darkness fell, they maintained a careful distance. Katherine brewed more coffee and lit lamps while Samuel ensured the doors were secure against the wind. The storm's intensity grew, rattling windows and seeping cold air through every crack. "This might last the night," he observed grimly, returning from checking the back door. "Not proper for me to stay." Katherine wrapped a shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Propriety matters less than survival, Mr. Yates. I trust you, and I believe the town would prefer a minor scandal to finding either of us frozen come morning." Her practical assessment disarmed him. They settled on opposite sides of the stove, the warmth between them purely physical as the temperature outside plummeted. "Tell me about your family," Katherine said after a comfortable silence had stretched between them, "if you don't mind speaking of them." Perhaps it was the storm's isolation, creating a pocket of time separate from his normal existence, but Samuel found himself answering. My father brought us west from Missouri when I was 14. My mother had died years before. I barely remember her. It was just Pa, me, and my younger brother James. He paused, memories rising unbidden. We built a small ranch north of here. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. James was always the dreamer, talked about building it into something grand. What happened to them? Katherine asked gently. Blackfoot raid 3 years ago. I was away delivering horses to Fort Benton. His voice remained steady, though the familiar ache swelled in his chest. Came back to find everything burned. They'd fought hard. Pa always was a good shot, but it wasn't enough. Katherine's eyes shimmered in the lamplight. So you left. Buried them, sold what was left, been riding ever since. He stared into the stove's flames. Figured it was safer that way. Can't lose what you don't have. Is that truly living, though? Her question held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. Or just existing? Samuel had no answer. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the night deepened, and eventually Katherine dozed off in her chair. Samuel watched her sleeping form, struck by how young she looked in repose. Barely 21, he'd learned, with dreams as vast as the Montana sky despite choosing to remain in this small town. Something protective stirred within him, an emotion he'd thought long buried with his family. It troubled him, this unwanted feeling. Attachments were dangerous on the frontier. That lesson had been written in blood and ashes. Morning brought clear skies and Frederick Zimmerman's return. The older man assessed the situation with surprising calm, accepting Samuel's explanation without suspicion. You kept my daughter safe, he said simply. I'm grateful. Samuel returned to the livery, expecting gossip to spread through town like wildfire. But the citizens of Pine Creek seemed to accept the circumstances as natural consequences of frontier life. If anything, the incident elevated his standing in the community, the honorable cowboy who'd protected Katherine Zimmerman's virtue during the blizzard. February arrived with bitter cold and increasing restlessness. Samuel found himself inventing reasons to visit the general store, and Katherine began stopping by the livery with baked goods or books she thought he might enjoy. Their friendship grew cautiously, like winter wheat beneath the snow, hidden but persistent. One evening, as Samuel repaired a saddle by lamplight, Preston settled nearby with a groan. Getting too old for this business, the older man said, rubbing his gnarled hands. Been thinking on selling come spring. Samuel looked up surprised. To who? Had some interest from Carson over in Willow Creek. Preston studied him with shrewd eyes. Course, I'd rather sell to someone who knows the place, someone who'd keep it running right. The implication hung in the air between them. Samuel returned to his work, needle moving steadily through leather. I don't stay in one place long enough to own anything, Preston. Maybe it's time you did. The old man stood with effort, something to think about anyway. The suggestion haunted Samuel through the night. Ownership meant permanence. Permanence meant vulnerability. The familiar urge to move on, to avoid entanglement, warred with an unexpected longing for stability. By morning, he'd convinced himself that spring would bring clarity. He would ride out as planned, finding work with another cattle outfit. Pine Creek and Katherine Zimmerman would become just another memory, safely distanced by time and miles. That afternoon, however, brought an unexpected visitor to the livery. A well-dressed man in his 30s strode in, removing expensive leather gloves as he surveyed the stable. Looking for Katherine Zimmerman, he announced without preamble. I was told she might be here. Something in the man's proprietary tone set Samuel on edge. She's not, try the general store. The stranger assessed Samuel with obvious disdain. And you are? Samuel Yates, I work for Preston. Victor Caldwell. The name was offered like currency expected to impress. An old acquaintance of Miss Zimmerman's from Boston. I've come to make her an offer I don't believe she'll refuse. Before Samuel could respond, Katherine herself appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from warm greeting to shocked recognition. Victor, what on earth are you doing in Montana? Caldwell turned, his face transforming into practiced charm. Katherine, my dear, you're as beautiful as ever. The frontier agrees with you, it seems. Samuel watched tension settle across Katherine's shoulders despite her polite smile. You're a long way from Boston, Victor. What brings you here? You do, of course. Caldwell moved closer, taking her hand without permission. I've spent months tracking you down. Your school friends were most unhelpful, loyal to your wishes for privacy, I suppose. But persistence has its rewards. Katherine gently but firmly withdrew her hand. I made my position clear before leaving Boston, Victor. My answer hasn't changed. Circumstances have, Caldwell insisted. My father's shipping company has expanded. We're opening routes through the Northwest Territories. I'll be overseeing operations from Helena, practically civilized compared to this settlement. His gaze swept dismissively around the livery. You needn't bury yourself here anymore. I'm offering you the life you deserve. Samuel moved to leave, uncomfortable witnessing what seemed a private conversation, but Katherine's voice stopped him. Mr. Yates, would you mind staying? Victor and I have no private business to discuss. The pointed remark clearly irritated Caldwell. Katherine, really, we have history that deserves respect. We have a past acquaintance and your persistent disregard for my decisions, she countered, a firmness in her tone Samuel had never heard before. Now, if you'll excuse me, I came to invite Mr. Yates to dinner. Father is smoking his special ham tonight. Caldwell's face darkened. You can't be serious, this, cowhand. Mr. Yates is a valued friend, Katherine replied evenly. And I don't believe I need your approval of my associations, Victor. The confrontation ended with Caldwell storming out, promising to call at the store the following day when you've regained your senses. Once he'd gone, Katherine's composure faltered. I apologize you had to witness that. Old suitor, Samuel asked, though the answer seemed obvious. Victor believes my year in Boston was meant to secure a husband, preferably him, she sighed. He never understood that I went there to study, not to find a match. His persistence borders on obsession. Seems the type used to getting his way. He is, Katherine met his gaze directly. The dinner invitation wasn't merely a convenient excuse. Father really would like you to join us tonight. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. I'd be honored. Dinner at the Zimmermans' comfortable home above the store revealed a side of Katherine he hadn't seen, the accomplished hostess, at ease in domestic settings despite her education and independence. Frederick proved an engaging host, sharing stories of Pine Creek's early days and his journey from Germany as a young man. This country offers second chances to those brave enough to take them, the older man said, refilling Samuel's coffee cup. I came with nothing but hope after my first wife died in the old country. Found purpose here, then love again with Kate's mother. Father loves telling immigrants' tales, Katherine said with affectionate exasperation. He believes everyone has an epic story waiting to be written. And what's yours, Mr. Yates? Frederick asked. A young man doesn't become a drifting cowboy without a story. Not much to tell, Samuel deflected. Just following work where I find it. Frederick's knowing smile suggested he didn't believe that for a moment. And where do you find it leading you next? The question hung uncomfortably. South, probably. Wyoming outfits will be hiring come spring. A pity, Frederick said, exchanging a glance with his daughter. Pine Creek's growing. Good men are needed here. After dinner, Katherine walked Samuel to the door. Thank you for coming. Father enjoys male company. He has few close friends in town despite his position. He's a good man. You're lucky to have each other. She studied him in the lamplight. What about you, Samuel? Who do you have? The use of his first name, spoken softly in the quiet hallway, affected him more than he cared to admit. I get by. That's not what I asked. Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Samuel broke away first, uncomfortable with the sudden intimacy. Good night, Katherine. Kate, she corrected gently. My friends call me Kate. March brought the first hints of spring. patches of grass emerging from melting snow, longer days, and the gradual return of birdsong. It also brought increased visits from Victor Caldwell, who had taken rooms at the Frontier Hotel and made no secret of his intentions toward Katherine. Samuel watched from a distance as Caldwell escorted her from the store to various town functions, noting how she maintained a polite but definite reserve. Their friendship had cooled since the dinner at her home, Samuel deliberately creating distance as Caldwell's presence became a fixture in town. The livery kept him busy, especially as Preston relied on him more heavily. The old man's health had deteriorated through the winter, and he spoke increasingly of selling the business. Each mention sent a conflicting surge of panic and possibility through Samuel. The thought of staying permanently both terrified and tempted him. One afternoon in late March, as Samuel worked in the corral with a spirited new mare, Katherine appeared at the fence. She wore a simple blue dress, her chestnut hair loose beneath a practical bonnet. "Good day, Mr. Yates," she called, formality having returned to their interactions. "May I speak with you a moment?" He secured the horse and approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Miss Zimmerman, what can I do for you?" "I need your honest opinion on something." Her expression was serious, almost troubled. "Victor has asked me to marry him. He's quite determined this time." The words hit Samuel with unexpected force, like a physical blow. He maintained a neutral expression through sheer will. "Congratulations." "I haven't accepted," she clarified quickly. "I wanted to ask, that is," she faltered, uncharacteristically uncertain, "is there any reason you believe I shouldn't?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Samuel gripped the fence post, mind racing. Every instinct screamed to tell her the truth, that Caldwell wasn't worthy of her, that the thought of her marrying anyone filled him with a jealousy he had no right to feel, that somehow, against all his defenses, she had become important to him. Instead, he said, "Not my place to have an opinion on your marriage prospects, Miss Zimmerman." Disappointment flickered across her face. "I see. Caldwell can offer you things Pine Creek can't," Samuel continued, the words bitter in his mouth. "Security, position. A life beyond this town. Those things don't matter to me," she said quietly. "They should. Frontier life is hard on women, no sense pretending otherwise." Katherine straightened, pride replacing vulnerability. "I'm well aware of frontier realities, Mr. Yates. I've lived them my entire life, save 1 year. I asked your opinion as a friend, but I see I've overstepped." "Katherine," he began, but she cut him off. "Good day, Mr. Yates. I wish you safe travels when you depart." She walked away, back straight and head high. Samuel watched her go, a hollow ache spreading through his chest. That evening, Preston found him aggressively mucking stalls, working well past necessary effort. "Heard Caldwell propose to the Zimmerman girl," the old man commented, leaning on his cane. "Town's talking about whether she'll accept." Samuel drove the pitchfork into the straw with unnecessary force. "Not my concern." "Sure looks like your concern from where I'm standing." Preston's voice held no judgment, only observation. "Girl like that doesn't come along often, especially out here. She deserves better than a saddle tramp with nothing to offer." "That what you think you are?" Preston shook his head. "Son, you've been running so long you've forgotten what you're running from, and what you might be running toward if you ever stopped long enough to see it." Before Samuel could respond, a commotion erupted from the direction of the general store. Shouts and the crash of breaking glass pierced the evening quiet. "Fire!" someone yelled. "The store's on fire!" Samuel dropped the pitchfork and ran, Preston's concerned calls fading behind him. Smoke billowed from the Zimmerman General Store, flames already visible through the ground floor windows. A crowd gathered in the street, Frederick Zimmerman among them, his face ashen. "Katherine's still inside," he cried, struggling against neighbors restraining him. "She went upstairs to rest." Without hesitation, Samuel pushed through the gathering crowd and charged toward the building. The front entrance blazed with fire, forcing him to the back of the structure where delivery doors offered possible access. Smoke poured from every opening, but he kicked in the rear door and plunged into the suffocating darkness. "Katherine," he shouted, crouching below the worst of the smoke. "Kate." The store's familiar layout had become a disorienting maze of flame and shadow. Samuel navigated by memory, making his way toward the stairs that led to the living quarters. The heat intensified, sweat pouring down his face as he fought his way upward, calling her name. He found her unconscious near the top of the stairs, overcome by smoke as she'd apparently tried to escape. Relief surged through him as he detected shallow breathing. Gathering her limp form in his arms, Samuel faced the daunting task of retreat. The stairs behind him now blazed with fire, cutting off their exit. Katherine stirred against his chest. "Samuel." "I've got you," he assured her, moving toward a window that might offer escape. "Stay with me." Outside, he could hear the organized chaos of a bucket brigade forming. The window overlooked a small ledge above the neighboring building's roof, a narrow but possible escape route. Samuel broke the glass with his elbow, cleared the frame of jagged shards, and assessed the drop. "Can you hold on to me?" he asked as Katherine regained consciousness. She nodded weakly, arms circling his neck. The trust in her smoke-reddened eyes nearly undid him. "Don't let go," he ordered, maneuvering them through the window. The ledge crumbled beneath his weight, sending them sliding down the pitched roof. Samuel twisted to take the brunt of the impact as they landed hard on the neighboring building's roof. Pain shot through his shoulder, but Katherine remained secure in his arms. With careful movements, he navigated them to a ladder where eager hands reached up to help. Frederick Zimmerman waited below, tears streaming unchecked down his weathered face as Samuel delivered Katherine safely to the ground. "Thank God," the older man sobbed, embracing his daughter. "Thank God." Katherine clung to her father briefly before turning back to Samuel, who swayed slightly on his feet, adrenaline fading into exhaustion and pain. "You saved my life," she said, her voice raw from smoke. Before he could respond, the town doctor pushed forward, insisting on examining them both. Samuel found himself seated on a bench outside the hotel as the bucket brigade continued their futile battle against the blaze. The store was clearly lost, the fire having spread too quickly to contain. The doctor pronounced Katherine suffering from smoke inhalation but otherwise unharmed. Samuel's injuries proved more serious: a dislocated shoulder, burns on his hands, and a gash on his forehead that required stitches. "You'll need rest," the doctor advised after treating him. "No heavy work for at least 2 weeks." Frederick approached as the doctor departed. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," he said, clasping Samuel's uninjured hand. "My daughter is all I have in this world." "Anyone would have done the same," Samuel demurred. "No," Frederick contradicted firmly. "Not anyone. Not many men would risk themselves for others. You're a rarity in that regard, Mr. Yates." As the night progressed and the fire finally died to smoldering ruins, the town rallied around the Zimmermans. Rooms were offered, clothes provided, and a collection taken to help rebuild. Samuel retreated to the livery, processing the night's events in solitude. He had nearly lost her. The thought repeated like a persistent echo, impossible to silence. The moment he'd found her unconscious, something fundamental had shifted within him. The protective walls he'd maintained since burying his family crumbling like the burning store. Preston found him sitting in Shadow's stall, staring vacantly at nothing. "You did a brave thing tonight," the old man said, settling onto a hay bale with a groan. "Fool-headed, maybe, but brave." "She could have died," Samuel whispered. "But she didn't because of you." Preston studied him carefully. "Changes things, doesn't it, when you realize what you stand to lose by never letting yourself have anything." Samuel looked up, the truth of the words striking him with clarity. "I've been a coward." "Nah," Preston disagreed gently. "Just hurt. Difference is, hurt can heal if you let it." The following days brought upheaval to Pine Creek. An investigation revealed the fire had been deliberately set. Coal oil splashed against the back of the building and ignited. Suspicion initially fell on Victor Caldwell, who had been seen arguing with Katherine shortly before the blaze. But the station master reported Caldwell had boarded the eastbound train an hour before the fire started, leaving town in apparent anger over Catherine's final rejection of his proposal. He said I'd regret choosing frontier mediocrity over the future he offered, Catherine explained to the sheriff, her voice still rough from smoke. But I can't believe even Victor would resort to arson out of wounded pride. The true culprit emerged a week later, a drifter with a grudge against Frederick for refusing him credit months earlier, apprehended in a neighboring town while spending an unusual amount of money. The revelation brought relief but little consolation as the Zimmermans faced the reality of their devastated business. Samuel's recovery progressed slowly. His shoulder healed, but Preston insisted he limit himself to light duties. During his convalescence, he had ample time to consider the path forward. The plans to leave Pine Creek no longer held appeal. Each time he imagined riding away, Catherine's face appeared in his mind, not just as she'd been during the fire, vulnerable and trusting, but in all the moments they'd shared. Her challenging questions, her quiet strength, her unwavering devotion to home and family. 2 weeks after the fire, Samuel found Catherine at the blackened remains of the store, sifting through debris in search of salvageable items. She wore borrowed clothes, her hair tied back with simple practicality, her hands protected by work gloves too large for her slender fingers. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," he said by way of greeting. She looked up, a smile warming her soot-streaked face. "Samuel, how's your shoulder?" "Healing," he joined her, carefully moving a charred beam. "What are you looking for?" "Father's strongbox." It contained the store's documents and some family keepsakes. She gestured to the approximate location. It should have survived the fire. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, the easy rhythm of shared purpose replacing the awkwardness that had characterized their last encounter. Eventually, Samuel unearthed the metal box, its exterior blackened but intact. Catherine's delight at the discovery transformed her face, reminding him of how young she still was, just 21, with so much life ahead of her. "Thank you," she said, clutching the box to her chest. "This means everything to Father. Our deeds, some photographs of Mother, his citizenship papers, all irreplaceable." "What will you do now?" Samuel asked, the question encompassing far more than immediate plans. Catherine surveyed the ruins thoughtfully. "Rebuild, of course. Father's already speaking with the lumberyard. The railroad has made Pine Creek too important to abandon." "And Caldwell?" Her expression hardened slightly. "Gone back east, I imagine." There was never any future there, despite his certainty otherwise. Samuel gathered his courage. "I've been thinking about staying permanently." Her eyes widened slightly. "What about Wyoming? I thought you were leaving with the spring." "Plans change." He met her gaze directly. "Preston's offered to sell me the livery. Says I'm the only one he trusts to run it properly." "That's wonderful news," Catherine said carefully, her expression guarded. "Pine Creek would be fortunate to keep you." "I'm not staying for Pine Creek." The words came more easily than he expected, the truth of them undeniable. "I'm staying because the thought of leaving you behind feels like losing another piece of myself, and I've lost enough already." Catherine's breath caught audibly. "Samuel." "I know I have no right," he continued, words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. "I pushed you away, told myself it was safer that way, but when I saw the store burning, knowing you were inside, I realized safety isn't worth the cost of never truly living." "And is that what I represent to you?" she asked softly. "Living rather than merely existing." "You represent everything I convinced myself I couldn't have." Samuel stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Home, purpose, a future worth building. I've been running since I buried my family, telling myself attachment was too dangerous. But the real danger is in never risking your heart at all." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. "I feared you would never see it. That you would ride away with the spring, taking a piece of my heart with you." "I'm not riding anywhere," he promised. "If you'll have me, I'm here to stay." Catherine closed the distance between them, her gloved hand finding his. "I don't need grand promises or fancy futures, Samuel. I just need someone who chooses this life, this place, alongside me. Someone who understands that roots aren't chains but anchors, holding us steady against whatever storms come. I understand that now, he said, his free hand gently brushing a smudge of soot from her cheek. And I choose you, Katherine Zimmerman, today and all the days to follow. The kiss that followed felt like coming home after a long journey, a perfect convergence of two paths meant to intertwine. When they finally parted, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply, the words he'd thought never to speak again, and I'm done running. 5 months later, on a perfect September afternoon, Samuel Yates stood beside Frederick Zimmerman on the porch of the newly rebuilt general store. The structure gleamed with fresh paint and possibility, larger and sturdier than its predecessor. Across the street, Preston's livery, now Yates Stables, displayed a freshly painted sign. Nervous? Frederick asked with knowing amusement. Terrified, Samuel admitted, adjusting his new suit jacket, but the good kind of terrified. That's marriage, the older man chuckled, and fatherhood, and most worthwhile things in life. The town had gathered in the square between the buildings, chairs arranged in neat rows, wildflowers decorating every available surface. Pine Creek had embraced the wedding as a community celebration, a symbol of renewal after the destruction of the fire. As the small ensemble of local musicians began to play, Samuel took his place before the preacher. His gaze fixed on the hotel entrance where Katherine would emerge. The months since the fire had been filled with work and planning, rebuilding the store, renovating the livery, constructing a small house on the edge of town that would become their home. Each step forward had healed another piece of the broken faith Samuel had carried since losing his family. In Katherine, he'd found not just love but redemption, the courage to build rather than run, to hope rather than fear. When she appeared in the doorway, a vision in ivory silk, Samuel's breath caught in his throat. The dress had been her mother's, carefully stored in a trunk that had survived the fire, altered by the town's seamstresses to fit Katherine's slender frame. Her chestnut hair was adorned with wildflowers, and her smile outshone the autumn sun as her father escorted her toward her future husband. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. Samuel heard himself speak the vows, felt the weight of the simple gold band as he placed it on Katherine's finger, but remained transfixed by the certainty in her eyes, the unwavering faith she'd always had in possibilities he'd been too afraid to see. I now pronounce you man and wife, the preacher declared. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. As their lips met in their first kiss as husband and wife, cheers erupted from the assembled townspeople. In that perfect moment, surrounded by the community that had become his own, Samuel Yates finally understood what Katherine had tried to tell him from the beginning, that the frontier's harshness made love not impossible, but essential. Later, as they danced beneath lantern light while the celebration continued around them, Samuel held his bride close. Happy? He asked, still marveling that this remarkable woman had chosen him. Completely, she answered, her head resting against his shoulder, though father's already hinting about grandchildren. Samuel laughed, the sound free of the shadows that had haunted him for so long. He'll have to be patient. I want time with just you before we expand our family. We have all the time in the world, Katherine assured him, her eyes reflecting the promise of their shared future. This is only the beginning. As night fell over Pine Creek, stars appearing like silver pinpricks in the vast Montana sky, Samuel Yates embraced the truth he'd fought for so long, that in this forgotten corner of the West, he had found not just survival, but genuine belonging. With Katherine's hand in his and the foundation of a life built together, the lone cowboy had finally come home.